Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Mind Matters. I am Hannah Albury and I'm the very proud head teacher of Yarborough Academy. I'm presenting today with my co-host Kate Marguson. The Mind Matters podcast is all about bridging the worlds of education and psychology, but most of all, uniting the brain and the heart. This series will explore our journey and the journeys of others as we embed, shape and create a whole school relational climate and culture.
We hope that Mind Matters starts a meaningful conversation that is human and relational, and that the stories, ideas and experiences that we discuss and share may be our bravest, our boldest, but also could be even our trickiest and our most difficult. We want to learn, educate and connect with people by heart and by mind.
So, as I've just said, my name is Hannah and I am the head teacher of Yarborough Academy.
Hannah, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Yarborough Academy, your journey to being head there?
So, that's a very interesting question. So before I became the head teacher, I was in the classroom teaching for 10 years. My main passions were early years and maths, but I am born and bred from Grimsby. I'm very proud to be from Grimsby. And then when we moved back to the area from living in Lincoln for many years, Yarborough Academy kind of became my home for my heart. And when the opportunity came to be the head teacher, I had to grasp it with both hands.
So you didn't come to Yarborough as the head teacher?
No, I taught there for 4 years before I became the head. A lot sooner in my career than I first anticipated.
Massive step.
Absolutely. The best thing I've ever done, though. Best thing I've ever done. So, Kate, would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'm Kate Marguson. I currently work at Yarborough Academy as behavioural health lead. A little bit like you, when you talk about coming back to Grimsby and being proud of being from Grimsby, I actually went to Yarborough Academy as a child and returned having completed my PhD. So my PhD was all around something called the Marguson Care Model, and CARE stands for Creating Attachment Relationships in Education. So a lot of the work I do is around understanding the importance of relationships, not only from the adult to child, but child to child and with parents and families too. So for me, it was about finding a home for a relational culture and finding a school that were willing to explore that a little bit further. And that led me back to where I started.
So that bit of conversation sounded very awkward and like we don't actually know each other, but Kate and I actually do know each other really well.
So if you want to wind it back and talk about the time that we first met and how we got to know each other.
Absolutely. So I became, I was successful at interview in May 2017, and it just so happened in the first week of me being in post that a meeting had been set up by the previous head teacher with Kate to kind of come in and do some work with some of our children. So Kate has been on this journey with me as head teacher from the very, very beginning. And if I'm honest, the moment I met Kate, it was almost like someone had switched the light on inside of me, and she spoke so much sense about the children that I have known and loved for many years. It's like you were a missing piece of my puzzle.
That's really nice. I feel like it's like the Kate show right now. So yeah, first day into the job-ish, I guess you were just kind of warming up to the job.
Absolutely.
I rock up to tell you about behaviour change and talk about adversity and understanding children's behaviour through a different lens. Interestingly, I have these conversations quite often with lots of schools. And I remember thinking it felt a little bit like a job interview. There was quite a few people in the room listening to me talk about how brains work, and little did I know, obviously 2 years later, it would be part of a job interview as I come to join you guys full time and kind of start our process in a different way again.
Absolutely, and we've done so much work as a school around the curriculum side of what we are and what we offer, that the behaviour side was not as developed and not as cutting edge as the rest of the stuff that we did. So in hearing you speak, it was like it just felt natural that would be the direction that we needed to go.
Absolutely. And I guess now would be a good time to talk about our roles and what we do in school. I know that head teacher might be quite clear on what you do. I guess in our school that might be a bit different. But I guess a behavioural health lead, I don't know any school that has anyone else doing that. So
No,
it might be useful for us to talk a bit about that.
I agree. So yeah, my job is pretty self-explanatory. I'm a head teacher, but Yarborough Academy is a single academy trust, which means that we're an academy, but we're independent of a multi-academy trust. We kind of stand on our own, in so much that we're not governed by anyone else other than our own kind of governors. Sorry. So that brings a whole host of exciting things. It means I have a lot of autonomy. It means that I am very much the captain of the ship. And it's really exciting. I get to do all kinds of jobs, from sorting out finances to hiring people to sometimes even cleaning the toilet. No 2 days are the same. But I just adore it. There's nothing in the world that I would rather do. And Kate coming to join our team was a really unique opportunity to bring someone who isn't a teacher formally. I would argue that Kate is as good as any teacher I've ever seen. However, bringing that kind of lens and that slant has given us a whole fresh outlook.
So I guess now would be a nice time to talk about my job and what I do. And I guess that is a bit of a longer story that we'll talk about in a different episode, about where the title behavioural health lead came from and maybe how that will evolve in time as well. But essentially, I lead the YA care team. So the pastoral team I lead in school, overseeing therapeutic intervention, but also community-based intervention with families, and also the universal emotional literacy provision that happens throughout the school. So it's through that we've been able to upskill lots of staff, deliver training, and work collaboratively with parents and other community providers to ensure that brain-based psychology, I guess, is at the heart of the educational offer that we have.
So I know I'm biased, but I think that Yarborough Academy is a pretty special place to be. Throughout the kind of journey since I've worked there, we have worked on this principle that children that are currently in our nursery will leave school to go into the world of work in the year 2035. So it's that notion of, do we want to teach the children how many wives Henry VIII had? Do we want to teach the children facts about history and geography, or do we want to give them the skills to be lifelong learners, to be able to function in a world that's ever changing, to be able to collaborate, to be able to communicate, to be able to have and maintain relationships, to have that lifelong love of learning and all of that entails. So when we had the opportunity of kind of branding and re-looking at our curriculum in real depth, we looked at how we can bring those ideas and how we can bring the curriculum to life. We talk about, we don't cover the curriculum, the children uncover it. We give them every single opportunity to be able to work collaboratively, critical think, present, work independently, all of those skills that are needed for future employment and for successful life. So what we've done is we've moulded a very unique curriculum offer, which means that we don't have long-term planning. We have authentic outcomes. Every project that the children do has got an audience that's beyond school. we have immersive environments, we give the children every single opportunity to be able to connect with the world and the community within Grimsby, but also the global community and what that means to be a 21st century citizen.
Absolutely. And I think in terms of Mind Matters and care and the pastoral work that we do, that kind of strengthens that offer as well. I often come back to, what do you remember about school when you're an adult? What is it that you say to your own child on their first day at school? Which teachers do you remember? Which experiences do you remember? And then it all comes down to learning is so much more than kind of verbs and nouns and addition and subtraction. It's so much more than that. It's based on experiences. And I think that's what kind of makes us quite magical in a way, that a lot of our learning is experience based. And that's the same for emotions as well. And I think obviously we started our journey with some real high-end targeted intervention work, but that has quickly broadened out, and it's now looking at universal intervention and universal support, I guess. So no longer seeing emotions as good and bad, kind of seeing emotions as indicators for an internal and external world rather than symptoms. So we have very much rolled the welcome mat out for all emotions. And we understand that emotions drive our behaviour quite often. They're an indicator for the internal world and the external world of everybody, not just children. And I think working on an emotional regulation basis universally is adding kind of that jewel to our crown as well, that our children can talk about how to process their emotions confidently, rather than this being, I'm overtaken by my emotions and I don't know how to manage them.
Absolutely. And when you marry that alongside the academic work, if you think about how the brain works and how you reach those cognitive parts of the brain, you have to be well regulated emotionally and have your basic needs met. And unless we do that, then the cognitive work that we do, or we strive to do, is futile. So it's how it marries so perfectly with what we're about. That kind of relational climate was the underpinning of and the strengthening of the work that we were doing.
Absolutely. That relationships are at the heart. If you feel safe and nurtured and cared for, that higher level access to the brain, it just happens. So creating safety, psychological safety, physical safety, but relational safety was so important in school, that we're no longer fearful of our emotions, but we process them together because we know that we've got each other. And I think we have to be honest about where we are right now. Obviously, we're not in school. We are currently at home because of coronavirus. And I just want to mention about yesterday on Google Classroom, where someone was having a tough time, and then they talked about what they did to regulate their feelings because life was a little bit tough for them that day. And I think that's just testament to the work that the whole school team are putting in to see emotions as feedback and to be able to process those together and safely.
Absolutely. And obviously people, when they listen to this podcast, might be 3 months ahead and we might be over the whole corona thing, it's hoping. But for us, and for me personally, this is a perfect time to press pause and have some creative space, and also for us to really set our stall out for, this is what Yarborough Academy are about, and even when the toughest of times, this is what we stand for, this is what we're around as a community.
I think for me, education is more than shaping minds, but it's shaping hearts too. And that's when I mentioned, like, what do you say to your child on the first day of school? Do you say, oh, I remember my first day of school, I had this teacher? And I think you're right, this time has given us time to reflect on how far we've come, but also where we want to go next. And seeing that re-entry into school as an opportunity to support our whole school community in a different way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think I attribute my personal success to how well those things were taught to me through my own family and also through my own school experiences, you're absolutely right. I don't remember any of the facts and figures that I learned at school, primary school especially, but I can tell you the best days out we had, the best trips we had, and you're absolutely, and the relationships I had with the people that cared about me and I cared for them. So I think it's how we do that for the children in our care, in a world where the relational stuff is sometimes squeezed out when you're under pressure of exams and social media and looking perfect and being a certain way, and it being a very closed down society. We all live in our little silos and no one really connects. It's how we break down those barriers as well.
Absolutely. And I think our school's kind of becoming a little bit better known for that now. And I think families are feeling the impact of the work that we're doing in terms of feeling relationally safe, and coming to us when things are tricky, but also when celebrations are due, and we can be part of that. So it becomes a bit of an extended family, connecting us all together. And I think never more has that been true than right now, that we are separated by distance. But my goodness me, after today and the emotional stuff that the parents have sent through to us, we've never been closer in terms of heart.
No, absolutely. I agree. Testament to the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, sure. And hopefully just by sharing some of those experiences, we can kind of inspire other people to look at their stuff and learn from other people and continue to grow this element of our work. But I think it's really hard to sum up what makes YA so magical, because it's people, not processes.
Absolutely. What I've learned through these last few weeks, that the building doesn't make the school, it's the people and the relationships that's inside of it. That's what makes it. That's what makes it magic.
Absolutely. So it might be now worthwhile talking about how we came to this point, because for some schools listening, I guess that they would be a little bit like, okay, this all sounds great. How do you fit all this in? What kickstarted this? Where do you find the time to do it? What does it look like?
Yeah, I think I wish that when we'd started on this journey that I'd had these conversations with other people that had walked the road before me. But I think the place it started was with one certain young man. So before we moved, we shifted a lot of our relational culture work and how we dealt with behaviour in school. We were still very much a very traditional punitive based system. I think that's fair to say. Clip charts in the classroom, isolation, loss of break time, merits, all of, traditional behaviour system work, behaviourist work. And when I was in the classroom, we had, and when I was teaching in year 1, I'll never forget his little face bounding through the door. We had a new member of the class join, and he found school really tough. He would find relationships really hard. He'd want to hide. He really struggled to play. He struggled academically. Struggled with most things. He was very much big externalizing behaviours we would see. But he was 5 years old, which meant that from my years of experience with working with early years as well, was able to very quickly build a relationship with him, and he settled into school. However, as he got bigger and older, these externalizing behaviours became more and more extreme, resulting in a huge amount of fixed term exclusions, aggression towards staff, not being able to access the classroom. When he got to year 5, he had a one-to-one and was very rarely in the classroom. Would spend a lot of time out with his TA, not connecting with anyone, which was really sad. And it escalated to a point where, so I then became head teacher, and in that first year, one day he decided to bring a BB gun into school and shot it at a member of staff, which resulted in him being me having to permanently exclude him from our family. And hands down, to this day, is the hardest thing I've ever had to do, ever. And knowing what I know now, a lot of his behaviours, all of his behaviours were communicating what his needs were. He was a very, very, very anxious young man. And had we done everything? Did we know everything there was to know? Absolutely not. If I could have my time again, would I change it? I absolutely would. But for me, that was the catalyst to think there is more to this, and we can't let children slip through our fingers and be permanently excluded at a rate of knots.
Absolutely. I think it's really important as well to mention that it was with kind permission from that lovely young man and his family that we share his story today.
Absolutely.
And that he is still very much the architect of that story, in terms of he enables us to share it in a way that he is happy with, and he is being storied in a way that he is content with. And I guess that kind of, I was working with you then on a freelance basis, and had a little bit of interaction with that young man. And I think, like you say, it did kickstart this journey, didn't it? I think the reaction of the staff, it was a grief reaction collectively across the academy. I think it was very shocking, and I think it started the process for us to see that there is another way.
Yeah, it's, for me, in reflection, it's twofold, because there absolutely is another way, and we could have done so much more. Would the outcome have been different? Who knows? But there would have been more things to do. But also, how we should never underestimate the powers of our relationship. Because I remember the day of the panel that we went to permanent exclusion, and his mum walked in and said, I don't quite know how I'm going to explain this to my son, because I've just walked out the door. And he said, it's okay, Mrs. Albury, you'll never get rid of me.
I remember that really clearly.
And I did. However, our relationship was still strong. It still remains strong now. So it's even lasted through a permanent exclusion. I still see him now. He still comes to visit me at school, not at home. He still comes back to visit me. If I see him out around in shops or wherever, it's like we are long lost friends. And so for me, it was how we change things, but how we thicken that relational density.
Absolutely. And I think it was an opportunity to do a bit of a lens check for us. I know it kickstarted a lot of training around attachment and adversity, and how we view children who may be frightened as frightening. And I think that switch for our team was quite profound.
Absolutely. It was that we had to kind of understand more. We had to know more. And if you know more, you can do better, can't you?
And I think that's it. Like when you were talking about you're very behaviourist based, I remember coming in and you were very behaviourist based. I remember that. But you do the best you can until you know more, and then you do better once you know it, don't you? So I think that's really important to see that as soon as you guys knew more, you did better.
I remember sitting and listening to and taking part in the training that you did for our staff, and it was that real aha light bulb moment of, this is why children behave in a certain way. They're not being awkward, they're not being rude. And it was like someone had flicked a switch inside of me from all the children that I had known and all the children that we have now and will meet in the future, that behaviour is so much more.
It's complex, isn't it? And the thing is with behaviour, that it feels quite personal, because it's a personal interaction between you and another person, and that's hard, isn't it, as staff? And we bring so much of our own attachment history and how we were parented and how our behaviour has been responded to previously. So this culture shift that you're talking about It's not easy, is it? It's not for everyone either, is it?
No, it's absolutely not. And we bring so much of our own school life, our own schooling experience into what we should do and how we should respond. And a lot of the time, for me personally, it's around control, feeling out of control in a situation that sometimes I can feel myself snap right back into that behaviorist way. Because you're right, it is so personal, and we all have our own triggers. We all have our own kryptonite, as we call them, kryptonite kids, and our own personal stuff that we bring to this. That it is more complex than I would ever have imagined.
And I guess that's where Mind Matters will start to explore that. The complexities, the day-to-day reality of it, and the learning that we've all done together as a team. And I think it would be nice to get staff involved in this and get their kind of viewpoints and experiences, as well as we can get children and parents. I think that would be awesome too. If we try and unite experts by experience to share their understanding of this process and their experiences, because that's where the gold is, that's where the magic is, in those relationships, in those experiences.
Absolutely. And what I really hope it is how we can celebrate those moments of unbridled joy, but also to not sugarcoat it, because you're right, it's not the destination, it's the journey that you're on. And my God, have we've learned so much more than, it's been a real roller coaster and continues to be. We have amazing moments, but sometimes the declines and the moments of ick, you have to embrace that, because that's when the learning really happens. And I hope that through this we can share that, and for people that are already on this kind of journey know they're not alone, but also to share some of our learning so people can grow from that as well.
I think that's a nice point to kind of talk about. We've done a lot to get us to this point, and I don't want this first episode to be a bit like, oh well, they're in here and they're talking about this stuff that they do, but it's involved traveling to America, it's involved extensive training and CPD, it's involved really looking at everything we do as a school through a different lens. And I think that we will unpick that with time, so please don't just think this has been a simple way that we've got to this point, because we continue to grow and evolve now.
And it's certainly not simple. It's certainly not been simple.
No, absolutely not. And I often come back to the most simple ideas for me. Like, I've always worked in relationships-based ways. It's because that makes a lot of sense for me personally, that my own research was all about relationships. It makes sense that relationships cause lots of different things in schools. And when you say it like that, well, relationships are at the heart of this, it sounds so simple, but the reality is relationships are so complex. Our relationship with children and the value and position of children in society and how we view them, our relationship with ourselves, with parenting, with schooling, it's so complex. And our relationships with everything are put under a spotlight, I guess. And that's a big process individually as a team member, as well as collectively as a whole staff.
And what I also want everyone to know, that even though we have done so much work with that, and a huge personal journey, the journey with myself has been more than the journey of an establishment, if I'm really honest. That even though we have done all of that work, we are by no means the finished article, and I don't think we ever will be. And I think the moment that you stop that growth is the moment it becomes stagnant and it stops working.
I agree. I know that we've talked a lot about the term trauma informed. I wouldn't say that we're trauma informed.
Absolutely not.
Trauma aware, maybe.
On the journey to be trauma informed, aspiring to be trauma informed.
I'm not sure that a single or phrase or word would sum up what we're trying to achieve. But I'm not sure, like you say, that there will ever be an end point where it is achieved, because it's dynamic. And it's an interaction, and interactions change based on lots of different factors, the pressures that we're under. I mean, who'd have thought when we first talked about starting a podcast that we'd be doing this from home because we've been in quarantine for weeks. We didn't think that would happen. So this will be an evolving podcast and process for us, I guess. And I guess as well, we will also do digging deeper into some of those things that have been kind of pivotal on our journey here. So like the training that we went on with NVR, the work that we did with Matthew Portell in America, obviously the work that you have done with Karen Traceman. I think that stuff all needs unpicking further, but I guess as a starting point, it gives you some idea of where we've been and where we want to go to.
Absolutely.
So with that in mind, where do you think Mind Matters will go, and where do you think this work will go for our school?
I hope that Mind Matters will become a real community, and we'll not only be able to document our own journey, but also have the voices of other people that have shaped it and will continue to shape it. And I hope that it becomes a real jewel in our crown, something that the whole community can be proud of.
I agree. I would like it to be a resource, and a resource for other schools, but also for families and for educators, and where possible for children as well, that we involve their voices and share that wherever possible. I think that's what we're about.
Absolutely. So I guess that is the introduction into our journey, if you like, and that kind of draws to a close our initial discussion and sharing with all of you guys about who we are. And next episode, we would like to talk more around our trip to America, which was right at the start of this journey, and something that really inspired me and in my work. I know that Kate is the same experience for you. So next episode we'll be talking about our trip to America and all that entailed, and we really, really hope that you will join us. Please find us and subscribe on whatever platform you normally get your podcast from, and please follow us on Twitter. We'd love to hear from all of you. I am at Hannah_Albury and Kate is at The Nurture Lady. Please follow us. We'd love to hear from you. Enjoy, guys.